one of those days. Today, on Versus, we are doing a question from my Curious Cat. We're doing a question from my Curious Cat, which you can find. My Twitter link is in the bio, and you can find my Curious Cat or ask her from there if you want to ask me a question that maybe you'd rather be anonymous about. I don't know why this person wanted to be anonymous. Maybe they're just trying to give me some fun. Brian De Palma versus Roman Polanski. This is right up my aisle. This is right in my general purview. I love both of these filmmakers so very much. I'm one of those fearless Polanski warriors. Let me just say this up front. This is a comparison of their artistic worth, of what they've given to us through film. Things like that. Every once in a while I may reference their personal lives and how that reflects in the films that they make, but this isn't a contest of character. It's a contest of talent and what they're able to do. But this one's very cool because both of these people have been called extensions of Hitchcock, or the next Hitchcock, even. Brian De Palma a lot more so, but what a lot of people miss about Brian De Palma is that he's never a Hitchcock purist. He's never completely paying homage or tribute to Hitchcock. In fact, he's deconstructing Hitchcock. He's almost parodying Hitchcock every chance he gets. My favorite film by De Palma is Body Double, which is shamelessly Rear Window, but done in deconstructionist, postmodernist erotica, done completely absurdly, without the capital A, just absurdly, just comedically absurd. It's gallows humor, it's macabre, and it's also quite brilliant because Brian De Palma is also so opulent and so operatic and so musical. And that's one of the primary differences between the two, is the musicality, the lyricism of De Palma's work. And Polanski, I think that he is an improvement over Hitchcock. I do understand why they call him the next Hitchcock. He has Hitchcockian methods in his films, but that's sort of inescapable when you're making suspense or thrillers, and Polanski has made some of the very best suspenseful films ever made. Rosemary's Baby, The Tenant, Knife in the Water, Repulsion, Frantic, the list goes on and on. I even loved The Ninth Gate. Polanski to me is the master of suspense. I love Alfred Hitchcock, but for me, Polanski's language is the master of suspense. But I don't necessarily believe that De Palma is trying to be the master of suspense. He calls himself, a visual stylist. I've read several interviews of his work, interviews from him. In fact, I own two different books, Roman Polanski interviews and Brian De Palma interviews, and they're both wonderful, and they're both almost like oral autobiographies, really. And Brian De Palma is a visual stylist. He hardly calls himself a filmmaker. He is obsessed with the juxtaposition of images, or the complete visceral experience of seeing something completely otherworldly, alien, or absurd. That's what he's most interested in. And he does love thrillers. Seeing Vertigo made him want to become a filmmaker in the first place. But he never wanted to pay direct tribute to the man who made that film. He wanted to deconstruct his methods. De Palma is far more scientific than Polanski. Polanski is actually a lot more emotional, even though he seems pretty cold in general in person, and he deals with rather cold materials, or these films have rather emotionless and very cold and pessimistic endings. De Palma is not, for all of his visceral images on screen, he's not a very visceral sort of filmmaker. He's also not an entirely intuitive one. He has it boiled down to almost a science. He's one of the cold filmmakers, actually, because he has it boiled down to a methodology, boiled down to a complete style. He knows exactly how you will feel when certain images dialectically collide with each other, because that's what his interest is. That's where it lies. And he is able to elicit very specific and very absurd emotions from people. Whereas Polanski, what's going on in his personal life, he can't help but show up on screen. He is like Hitchcock in the respect that you cannot trust a single interview from Polanski. If you charge him with this kind of emotionality within his films, he will deny it completely. Just like Hitchcock would, almost like Fritz Lang, almost like a compulsive liar, but where Fritz Lang would compulsively lie out of egotism, I believe Alfred Hitchcock compulsively lied because he was very private, and I believe that's the same with Polanski in a way. Hitchcock would completely change his biography. He would lie about where he comes from, lie about the eroticism in his films, the very blatant and very obvious eroticism in his films. Polanski would lie about whether or not personal tragedies or personal things in his life showed up on screen in any way. That's really where he gets most fascinating. Rosemary's Baby being made when he's starting his a family of his own. Rosemary's Baby is also brilliant because it's about a woman's right to choose, and everyone around her is trying to take that independence away. So I got like coffee bean in my mouth, coffee grain. It's fucking disgusting. But it's about the woman destroyed by seeking independence in a world that is ultra-conservative. What's even more interesting is Polanski's Macbeth, a direct response to the Manson murders of his wife Sharon Tate and unborn child. That's completely fascinating as well. Polanski's own personal life seeps into his films in the most visceral way possible. Macbeth is ultra-violent, but if you asked Polanski, he wouldn't see it that way, or at least he would claim to not see it that way. Polanski is a master, and when Polanski takes control of a thriller, takes control of a suspense film, Knife in the Water is one of the most suspenseful films ever made, where almost nothing of actual carnage happens. Repulsion is one of the most brilliant films ever made, because it's about the beautiful, the otherworldly, the goddess, the angel, Catherine Deneuve, being repulsed by your own attraction to her. Polanski knows that you are deathly attracted to that woman, and he uses your attraction, your male gaze against you in the most incredible way possible, in the most haunting way possible, and punishes you for it. And Catherine punishes you for it as well, for objectifying her. It's amazing. The Tenant. Oh my God, The Tenant. Few films exist that are as psychologically bizarre and perplexing and challenging and paranoid as that film, and as full of grief and guilt as that film. Once again, look at his own life and compare it to the film that he's making at that time. Rosemary's Baby is what I consider to be his best film, because I think it's to me, Rosemary's Baby is the perfect thriller, the absolute perfect thriller. From beginning, there's not one mistake made. All of them witches. It's perfectly set up, perfectly paced. It starts off as a Doris Day kind of adventure, with this beautiful flowing pink cursive title card font, and it completely destroys itself. It uses that and as its basis of misdirection, and it leads you all the way to hell. That's quite a way to go from Doris Day. And great John Cassavetes' performance, great Mia Farrow performance. That movie is one of the most perfect movies in the world. I love Rosemary's Baby. And we look over at Brian De Palma, known very much for his thrillers. We all love Blowout. We all love Body Double. We all love Dressed to Kill and Sisters, but none of these films truly hold a candle to any of the Polanski thrillers that I just named. It doesn't even hold a candle to the Fearless Vampire Killers, which is more of a comedic, offbeat film. None of them hold a candle to it, because Brian De Palma is far more interested in visual aesthetics than he is in actually putting together a sort of film that is dynamically becoming. It once again boils down to films that are dynamic becomings, films that can change within time, films that have a lot of emotionality put directly into them, and films that are static beings. Films that, it doesn't make them particularly lesser films, like Fritz Lang and Stanley Kubrick and Hitchcock made static being films, where there is an actual, complete, objective meaning, and you have to figure it out. It might take you a very long time, but there is an actual, objective meaning, and there's not a whole lot of emotionality involved within it. It is exactly what De Palma wants you to feel. Whereas Polanski will allow you to feel several different things. Look at Chinatown, one of the greatest films in the history of the world. I feel like I'm saying that on a lot of Polanski films, which hopefully makes you understand why I'm being led to this decision. Chinatown, one of the greatest films ever made, definitely the greatest neo-noir ever made, and fuck that distinction, it's probably one of the top 3 film noir ever made, just in general, one of the best noirs. And it is haunting, it is so scary, it is so cruel. and it is so entertaining and delicious and perfectly framed. But it's also transcendental. It's also dynamic. It can also change given the context of its time period. It could transcend the 70s. It can mean different things to different people and acquire new meanings along the way. And there is no absolute meaning. There are absolute like visceral consequences of images on screen and of structural thematic concepts and ideals. But you can watch Chinatown, Rosemary's Baby, Repulsion, or Knife in the Water at any time in your life, at different points in your life, and you will pull something rather different from it. If that happens to you with a De Palma film, it really means that you didn't understand it in the first place. Where De Palma kind of capitalizes or gets that hand over Polanski in a certain sense, is that when Polanski steps outside of thrillers, he's a little weak. I mean, I love Tess. And there are certain films I do love where he steps outside of thrillers, but that's where he's his best. I mean, they both have their bombs. Oliver Twist is probably Polanski's worst film, but it's nowhere, actually, and De Palma's worst film is Bonfire of the Vanities. I forgot about that until I just started saying that sentence. And Bonfire of the Vanities is actually better, if for nothing more than at the very beginning, we do get one of those amazing De Palma tracking shots. We do, and it's amazingly choreographed. It's a terrible film, but that beginning is wonderful, and it does not dilute the auteur behind the film. So, I think that's wonderful. Oh, come on. Work for me, lighter. Oh, looks like I have to quit smoking now. But to make this video relatively short, and to get to that point that I was making, when De Palma steps out of his usual comfort zone and makes some gangster films like Scarface, Carlito's Way, or The Untouchables, those films are much better than when Polanski steps outside of his comfort zone. But the whole thing, Polanski mastered the thriller, mastered the horror film. He's a master of it. De Palma is a master of none. And that's where Polanski takes the cake. Polanski is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. He's also a very damaged individual as well, incredibly problematic. But that's okay, because for me, I don't want all of my artists to be safe. I don't want all of my artists to be sterile. I want some of my artists to be people who I don't want to be like. I want there to be a specific reason that these people have these voices, these messages that just resonate with so many people and are on this, lighted stage, this public sphere, this public arena. I want them to be very, very inhuman sometimes. I love pleasant artists. I love artists who are absolutely genuine, sincere, and nice, and aren't monsters. But every once in a while, we need some kind of monstrous artist, especially ones like Polanski, who deal with very dark issues. The darkest issues possible. I mean, he's dealt with Lucifer on several occasions here. A filmmaker who is most known for dealing with Lucifer, I want to be kind of troubled. I don't want it to be made by someone who is in any way flawless or in any way perfect. I want it to be made by someone who is so troubled that he has been exiled, that he is most likely going to die in shame. I will love him forever because of the films that he made, because of how much he proves how much of yourself you can put into a genre film, and it makes it that much more powerful. So much more powerful. And I'm watching a Polanski film, I am watching something that is personal to him. Even Oliver Twist, I mean, he grew up, good God, man, in Holocaust, as a child, stealing bread. I mean, those kids and the pianist, like, scuttling under the fence, that was him. That was his emotionality, his own personal experience being injected into that film, which is a great film that does step outside of thrillers, and that's a good film. Some of his other ones where he steps out aren't very good. The Pianist is an exception in here. Exceptions do not, doesn't change what I meant. But The Pianist is great, because there's so much of that emotionality, and so Oliver Twist does have that emotionality, because he does have that kind of orphan spirit to him, that soulful orphan character to him. Polanski is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. He edges out Brian De Palma, and I love Brian De Palma. Brian De Palma was one of the guys who got me into film in the first place, got me into cinephilia, specifically in the first place. I went nuts over Brian De Palma when I was like 13 years old. I tracked down every movie I could possibly find. Problem is, I've outgrown quite a few of them. I'll never outgrow Body Double. I'll never outgrow Blowout, or Fucking, I mean, I still love Scarface shamelessly. I do really like his films, but I've grown out of them in the sense that I don't think that they're the pinnacle or that they're the peak of the thriller. Polanski, I can never grow out of because it's dynamic becoming, because dynamically those films will move and those films will alter their meanings the older I get and the more that my sensibilities alter themselves over time naturally. Love Roman Polanski. If you have a filmmaker that you'd like to see me cover, leave it in the comments. You can also do film versus film, genre versus genre, decade versus decade. Leave it in the comments. Either on, you can go on Curious Cat as well as where I got this one from. And you can find that through my Twitter, which is in the bio. The link in the description of this film. Thank you very much. My name is Zachary Conan. Keep these videos coming. Like, comment, subscribe, share, YouTube shill bullshit. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. It really means one hell of a lot to me that you guys are watching my channel. Have a remarkable day.